Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. Please let me introduce Alex Wadengard. He does marketing for the developer ecosystem, and he and I are going to take a bit of time today to talk about where the developer ecosystem state of the union. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Cool. Yeah, hi, everyone. I want to start off really quickly with a story. Has anyone played Counter-Strike before? A few people? All right, well, back in high school, I played a lot of Counter-Strike. And it's this game where counter-terrorists kill terrorists and vice versa. And it's based on Half-Life. It's a super fun first-person shooter. And there are these clans or teams that people play on against one another. And I was part of a clan. And back then, our clan needed a website. So I went to the place where all noble people go to make websites, which was GeoCities. And I made this sweet GeoCities page. It didn't even have any, I didn't even code any HTML, but I used the awesome little drag and drop stuff, and I added a sweet flame counter at the bottom. So I knew exactly how many people visited the site. And this was honestly the first computer science-y thing I ever did, if you call it that. But I got this crazy satisfaction from seeing that counter go up. Really, I did. It probably maxed out at like 250 or something like that. But every time I saw someone visit my website, I got really excited that someone was using the software that I used. And really, that satisfaction brought me to technology, and I even used it in my essay to admit, hopefully, in my admittance essay for computer science. And that's why I'm here, ultimately, is because I get this satisfaction out of writing software and seeing people use it. But what about you guys? You guys are here because we're going to talk about plugins, right? Plugins are developed by developers. I assume many of you are in this category, people who have made plugins. And there are a few different types of developers out there. First, there are corporate developers, people who build plugins for your company, right? These are customizations or maybe integrations with proprietary systems. Is there anyone doing that sort of development? Yeah, pretty good amount of you guys doing that stuff. Cool. There's also system integrators, and these are folks who are doing the same type of development work. However, they're doing it on behalf of a customer, right, on a contractual basis. Are there any system integrators here? A few? Cool. So the third one is what we call commercial developers. These are people who build plugins to sell to Atlassian customers, right? So you saw in the keynotes, there's an example, Glyphy and a lot of those Launchpad guys have a lot of these sorts of plugins. Any commercial developers in the audience? A few of those, cool. And then lastly, we have open source developers. And these are developers who build plugins and give to the community under an open source license because maybe they like to just have people use their software. Any open source developers? Cool. Great. So regardless of what you're building, I want to try to share with you guys some exciting characteristics about the ecosystem. Hopefully, you guys can find that same satisfaction that I found in GeoCities. It sounds odd when I say that, but it was true within our ecosystem. So today, I'm going to talk to you guys about, first, the activity that we've been seeing in the ecosystem. And then Jonathan will come on stage and talk a little bit about some announcements about technologies that we've been working on, and hopefully things that you guys will be really excited to see. And lastly, Jonathan will go through what's coming next, what we're going to be spending the next year or so on for you guys in the ecosystem. So let's start with activity. For several months, we found that roughly every 2 days, a new plugin hits the plugin exchange. So right there, that's already a pretty impressive stat, right? Every 2 days, there's a new plugin hitting the plugin exchange. There's 4 updates hitting the plugin exchange every day. But it turns out that that's just the tip of the iceberg. We did some calculations, and we can estimate that at a minimum, there's actually 2 plugins being developed out there every single day. The reason why there's a lot of plugins built that actually don't make their way to the plugin exchange. A lot of these corporate developers might build a plugin that solves a problem within their organization and never shares it with the plugin exchange. And so we've seen that there's at least 2 plugins built every day. These are customizations, open source plugins, integrations, you name it, right? There's a lot of activity going on, and I think it's really exciting. Of the plugins that are on the plugin exchange, 75% of them are open source. That means that if you're out there building a plugin, you have access to over 500 open source plugins that you can use as an example. You can depend on them if the license lets you do that. And you can contact the developers behind these plugins to learn from them, to get help, etc. So there's a lot of plugins being built and used out there. What about actual development, though? So in addition to new plugins, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the SDK, which is the tool that hopefully, everyone goes to build a plugin, right? Has everyone used the SDK? All right, a lot of you. Well, if you haven't used the SDK, if you're going to build a plugin, it's the right way to do it. If we look at the number of SDK downloads, we see 33 per day from unique IP addresses. So every day there's 33 people downloading that SDK to update a plugin, to build a new plugin, to test a plugin, what have you. And that's a lot of development activity. There's a lot of people out there building on Atlassian. And I think it's really exciting. So there's a community out there and there's an ecosystem out there of people doing interesting things on Atlassian, building plugins, etc. But what about those of you that want customers? So what about those of you that are building commercial plugins or building open source plugins? I know that wasn't the majority, but still, you guys are part of the ecosystem. So, whoops, sorry. So maybe you guys are looking for someone to sell your plugin to, or maybe you're looking for someone to just use your plugin and find that satisfaction that I found in GeoCities, of all places. So if you're looking for customers, the good news is that we got them, right? We have over 60,000 customers if you include not only commercial or enterprise customers, but also starter customers, people that just pay $10 a month for our products, or sorry, $10 for a license. Community customers, people at open source foundations, etc. And then also academic customers. So there's over 60,000 customers using our products. That's, as Mike said in the keynote, that's over 5 million end users actually using our tools. And I think that hopefully that's an exciting opportunity for you guys to either get your software used or sold to these customers. That's all good though, right? So we have a lot of customers, but do those customers actually use our plugins? And the answer is yes. If we look at the average number of plugins installed per product, the numbers are pretty impressive. With Fisheye and Crucible, we see that there's on average 3 plugins installed per instance. With Jira, we see 7. Bamboo, we see 8. And with Confluence, we see 12. And what's so impressive, I think, about these numbers is that this does not include the plugins that we bundle by default with our products. These are user-installed plugins that people have gone out of their way to install. And I think these numbers, again, are really impressive, and they show that people are using plugins, and that there's not only this huge group of customers that you have access to, but that those customers are actually using these plugins. I should say one thing, too. Confluence is way ahead of the game compared to the other products, and that's because we traditionally, or at least up until now, Confluence was easier to install plugins on. But you'll see in Jonathan's talk that that's changing, and I hope that maybe in a year this graph will be a little bit more even. So he'll tell you more about that later. But cool. So anyway, we have a lot of customers. Customers are using these plugins. But what about fun? What about fun in our ecosystem? Well, back when I made my GeoCities page, there was no, at least not that I knew of, competition to see who had the sweetest GeoCities page. Maybe now. There's a competition on the worst one, right? But I might have won that one. But anyway, I would have liked to have some fun in that community, and there wasn't, besides just being able to see that sweet flame counter. However, in our ecosystem, we have a competition called Geist. This is a plugin coding competition. We just did our 5th one a few months ago. It started at the beginning of April, and it ended just 2 weeks ago. And the idea is that plugin developers create a plugin, submit it to Geist, and enter to win prizes, right? We've done these before, but this year I'm really excited to share some of the details with you right now. So we wanted to go really big this year. So we started off by giving away $45,000 in cash prizes. And that was broken down into a few different categories. First, there was $15,000 for the best overall plugin. There was $15,000 for the highest voted plugin. And there were 2 $7,500 prizes for the best use of new technology. new technology that Jonathan will tell you guys more about when he comes up on stage. And we couldn't be happier at Atlassian to share with you that this was the biggest code geist we've ever done. We had 60 entries this year, which is, again, it's the most we've ever had. And it's great for us. We couldn't be more excited, but why should you guys care about code geist, right? If anything, this just means that the competition's more heated. First of all, we released new technology at Code Geist, right? Again, Jonathan will talk about what exactly we released. We released a few developer previews, which gives you guys an opportunity to try out new things. We also did cash prizes, right, as I showed you, which have their own very clear incentive for participating. We have free T-shirts, which will go out eventually. Atlassian's a big printer of T-shirts. And really, it's just an excuse to hack, right? Like, we saw a lot of people spending nights and weekends on plugins that they would otherwise not build because they don't have time in their day or whatever. And I think a lot of these incentives really got a lot of people excited and a lot of people developing what they would otherwise maybe just think about. So next time, hopefully, you guys can participate in Code Geist. And actually, how many people, anyone in the audience participated in Code Geist? All right, sweet, we got a few. Cool. Well, anyway, stay tuned for Code Geist next time. We're going to do it again. And for those of you that did participate, just want to say really quickly thank you. Again, this was a really fun Code Geist, at least for me, it was my first. But it was really exciting to see a lot of the really beautiful plugins that were created. Jonathan will talk a little bit more about them, and the winners are going to be announced tomorrow on the main stage. So stay tuned for that, because there are some really cool plugins that came through. The last thing I want to talk about before I give the mic to Jonathan is that I want you guys to know that as you're developing these plugins, that you're not alone. There's a whole team at Atlassian devoted to basically making you guys successful, right? And the team is called Developer Relations. I'll spend a quick few minutes introducing all of us on the team. Many of these names you've probably seen before, or many of them hopefully you'll get to know later. The first is Ben Speakman. Spends a lot of time on IRC, forums, does a lot of engineering work. Jonathan Nolan, he'll speak to us in a few minutes, but he kind of leads us all and also does some engineering work. Dan does engineering work, documentation, tutorials, also forums, IRC, etc. Sam has been spending the last many months on one of the new technologies that Jonathan will announce. He also is involved in the forums, etc. I do a bunch of marketing for the ecosystem and also for commercial plugins. And lastly, our newest hire, Daniel, spends time on product management, speccing, roadmaps, etc. And Daniel's in the back for those of you that haven't met him yet. So again, we're here to help. He's waving now, yeah. We're here to help make you guys successful. That's our job. And Jonathan will talk a little bit about how you can interact with us later. But if there's one thing that I want you to remember from my little 15-minute talk here, is that really there's a big community of plugin developers working on Atlassian plugins, right? Much bigger than the audience in this room. We saw that there's just tons of development, that there's tons of SDK downloads, and there's a lot of chatter and hopefully fun things going on. So I hope that you guys can find that same satisfaction I found in our ecosystem. Hopefully you don't feel alone, and hopefully you can feel like there's support when you need it, either from your peers or from Atlassian. So with that said, I'll ask Jonathan to come on up to talk about what we've been working on and what's coming next.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. As he mentioned, I am Jonathan Nolan. I am the Director of Developer Relations, and that means that for the last 6 years, I've had the privilege of working with all of you guys in our ecosystem and seeing the amazing work that you've done on top of the Atlassian platform. So my mission today is to tell you a little bit about what we've been up to over the last year and also share some of our plans for the next year. And when I look back at fiscal year 2011, what I really see is a big year of technology investment. So we've spent a lot of time over the last year, a lot of engineering effort, building some tools and frameworks that will make your jobs easier and more effective. And I'm going to go over 4 major ones today. Some of these we talked about at Summit last year in 2010, and some of them are brand new. And I'm going to start with one that we demoed on stage at the keynote in Summit 2010, and that is the Universal Plugin Manager. So the Universal Plugin Manager is a single unified interface for dealing with plugins across all Atlassian applications. You install plugins the same way, you manage plugins the same way, enable, disable. So if you've learned it in one application, you'll know it in the others. It offers one-click download and install of every plugin in the Plugin Exchange. It gives you upgrade notifications. So when plugin developers release new versions of their software, you, the Jira or Confluence or whatever product admin, will get notified. And we also introduced a feature called upgrade compatibility checking. So when you're ready to upgrade your product instance, you can use the UPM to run a report that will tell you what plugins will be compatible, which ones will need to be upgraded, and which ones might cause you problems when you do the upgrade. That feature's been fantastically popular since we put it out, and we know that it's saved a lot of people a lot of time. So when we showed you this last year at the keynote in 2010, it was available that day for you to download, and it was compatible with most of our applications, but it was not yet shipping in any of our products. I'm happy to announce that in the year since, we have shipped the UPM in Confluence, Jira, Fisheye, Crucible, and just a month ago we completed the cycle and shipped it in Bamboo 3.1. So the UPM is now bundled in all of our plugin hosting applications, and that means that, as Alex mentioned earlier, it's going to be even easier for users of those applications to discover and install plugins. And we've already seen that have an effect. So we know that last year we had about 50,000 downloads from the Plugin Exchange in the month of May. The month of May this year, we had 85,000 downloads, and 50% of those came directly through the UPM. So we think that the UPM has been a pretty big driver of growth, and we're excited to see what it does now that it has shipped in all of our products. We expect that the plugin ecosystem is going to thrive as more and more people are able to discover what's there. So the second technology is one that we didn't talk about last year because it actually didn't exist at that point. But have you ever thought about wanting to tweak an Atlassian product in some small way that might make your life a little bit easier, but thought it's not really worth the effort of writing a whole plugin to do it? Or have you ever wanted to rapidly try out an idea with real data in your running instance, but you might have been scared to do that because it would affect everyone else that was using that application instance? Well, we found ourselves facing that problem quite a lot. And one of our very prolific developers, Don Brown, who is responsible for the plugins framework itself and many of the other tools that you depend on, decided to solve that problem. He built a framework called Speakeasy. So this is a new kind of plugin in the Atlassian ecosystem. It's a plugin framework, and these are a plugin that makes certain existing things much easier and much faster, and it also enables some new behaviors that plugins have never been able to exhibit before. On the existing behavior side, these plugins are fully front-end, so HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and that's all you need to know. So there's no Java, there's no XML, there's no SDK, there's no jar file. It's purely front-end technologies. And so we think that that is going to open up the plugin development process to a whole new kind of developer, people who have not traditionally been able to do that. As a matter of fact, we've already seen this happen inside Atlassian. We've got several extensions that have been written by people like product managers who have no Java development experience at all, and they're actually really super useful. Speakeasy extensions also take advantage of convention over configuration. So there's less boilerplate XML to write, actually no boilerplate XML to write. You don't have to create a jar, you can just make a zip, you put the right files in the right place, and Speakeasy knows what to do with that. And lastly, Speakeasy extensions are editable online. So that means live in the application. You can hit edit, you'll get an editor just like this, make your change, hit save, and that change is immediately available on that running instance. It is absolutely the fastest way to try out an idea for a Confluence or Jira plugin. But as I said a minute ago, Speakeasy also makes some radically new behaviors possible. First of those is that Speakeasy extensions are per user. So I can write a plugin, I can enable it for myself, and no one else on that instance will ever know it's there unless they go enable it also. So I can make a tweak that might only be relevant to my workflow, or a tweak to the user interface in a way that I prefer that maybe my team doesn't. But if those ideas are good and if they spread and if people like what I've done, Speakeasy extensions are shareable. So every user, not just admin, but every user can see the Speakeasy extensions installed on the instance. You go to the extensions page and you can enable any of the ones that anyone else has written and uploaded. You can also see how many people have enabled each extension, so you can see which ones are popular, the ones you might want to check out first. And then one of the sort of most fundamentally different things about it, one of the things that I'm most excited about, is that these extensions are essentially, they're hackable, right? So any Speakeasy extension installed on your instance, you can fork it yourself and then use that editor to make a change. So if somebody has done something that you think is pretty cool that you think you might improve, you don't have to get permission, you don't have to wait and talk to that developer, you simply fork it, edit it, save it, and then you're using your new version. So it's we think, really going to speed up the rate at which people can try out new ideas inside our application. So we're really excited about that. We've been using this internally for a couple of months, and then we also made it one of the special technology categories in CodeGeist this year. We wanted to get some feedback from people in the community just like you. And we had a ton of really great entries, and I'm going to show you a couple of extensions that we developed in-house for our own use. The first one is issue hovers in Jira. So every time you see a linked issue key inside a Jira issue, you can highlight it, and you'll get this little inline dialog showing you the pertinent details about the issue without having to click and reload a whole new page. It makes my experience of Jira just a little bit faster and smoother every day. On the Confluence side, this actually was one written by Mike Cannon-Brooks. He decided he wanted to see previews of the attachments on the Confluence page. So we coded this up in a couple of hours, put it up, and now dozens of people are using that on the Confluence instance that we spend most of our time on. So that's Speakeasy. A whole new kind of plugin, a powerful new framework, front-end technologies, per user, shareable, hackable. And we think this is going to be a really important addition to the toolkit that you guys have as you develop plugins for Atlassian products. So let me tell you about the roadmap. There's a developer preview available today. It's the same one that folks have been using for CodeGeist. We're putting out rapid releases every few weeks, and we really want you to try it out. We'd love to have your feedback. We're going to take that feedback over the next few months, and then we're going to incorporate it and aim to have this as a fundamental part of the Atlassian platform sometime later this year. There's a full-length Speakeasy talk tomorrow at 11:15 given by the creator of Speakeasy, Don Brown. So he will give you the full toolkit to get up and running with Speakeasy, and he'll even show you how easy it is with some live coding. So mark that on your calendar, check it out tomorrow.
Is that Jira only, Speakeasy?
It's supporting Jira and Confluence now, and we've got spikes of Bamboo and Fisheye ready to go very soon. All right, the third technology. This is another one that we talked about last year. Let me ask you guys, how many of you have ever written code to store data from one of your plugins? Everybody, right? Has anybody ever run into problems where you couldn't store enough or you couldn't retrieve it quickly enough? Right? So this is sort of a limitation of the Atlassian platform that we've all experienced over the last several years. We have some technologies for data storage. Bandana you might be familiar with, and plugin settings you might be familiar with, but those are extremely limited. Bandana, for example, is backed entirely by XML. So in order to do any data manipulation, you have to create an XML document, store it, read it back out, parse it, and just to get your data. So that quickly ran into scaling and speed problems in a lot of instances. So we knew this was a problem. We stood up in the State of the Union last year and said that we were going to tackle that problem this year. And we've worked on it all year, but I'm happy to announce that we have a solution. And it's called Active Objects. Samuel Barragot in France has spent most of this year building Active Objects, and it solves the problem of large-scale data storage for plugin developers just like you. Let me show you how it works. So with Active Objects, it's a framework that's an implementation of the active record pattern, and it allows your plugin to write directly to the database. You can create your own tables, you can define your own entities, you can save and retrieve data at database speeds. But most importantly, your data and your plugin is protected from every other plugin running inside the instance. Another plugin can't access your data, you can't access theirs, and also you can't directly access the Giro database. So you go through the Jira API to manipulate Jira, and you go through Active Record to get your data out of the database. Let me show you what it looks like from a code perspective. So in this case, we have a class called to-do. It simply stores a to-do record in the database. You can see with ao.create, we've created a new instance of that entity, and with to-do.save, we save it off to the database. You can retrieve it with ao.get, class and ID, and then remove it with ao.delete. It's that simple. So as Alex mentioned, we had Active Objects as a special category in Geist, and we had some fantastic entries. We were really happy with some of the amazing work that got done, and I think it really validated what we set out to do with Active Objects. I want to show you two of them that are my particular favorites. The first is a Jira example, and it's called Jira Hero. And what it does is it lays an achievement layer on top of Jira. So every time you interact with Jira, it stores that activity. You collect points. And then you can get badges for the various things that you do. So you can see there's one called the Insomniac. If you follow a bug after midnight, then clearly you're up too late playing with Jira. There's one called VI Ninja. So the more keyboard shortcuts you use, the more likely you are to get that badge. It's super fun. It may not like radically change how you do development, but it's a way to make the process of what you do every day at work a little bit more fun. But if you think about what this plugin does, it is actually dealing with a very large amount of data. It's storing rows for everything, for every activity that every user does in Jira. And we think that this plugin just simply would not have been possible in the old system. So Active Objects has enabled a whole new type of application that we would not have seen before. Confluence example, moderate comments. People often want to use Confluence in a public setting. They want to moderate those comments, but we've never built that feature. So Geist Intra did exactly that. And he stores all that data in Active Objects so he can access it quickly. And then allow an administrator to approve comments. Again, it's a application that would have been extremely difficult to build in the old system. So that's Active Objects. It solves the problem of large-scale, efficient plug-in data storage. And I'm sure you're all curious about the roadmap for this one as well. Well, there will be a developer preview in Jira 4.4. So it's there in the beta that you can download today. It will be shipping as a developer preview technology in Jira 4.4 Final that you'll see later this summer. And so we're putting it out there because we want, again, you guys to use it and give us feedback. Based on the feedback we get over the next few months, we will refine it, fix any problems that we find, and it will be a shipping as a stable and fundamental part of Jira 5.0. So there's an Active Objects lightning talk tomorrow at 1:30, given by Ben Speakman. Mark that on your calendars as well. So another question for the audience. How many of you have ever written code to connect an Atlassian application to some other application? Wow, that is a lot of hands. So we thought that this was the case. We know that we have to do this all the time, both to connect one Atlassian app to another one, but also to other services and apps inside of our organization. So we're pretty sure that you guys have the same problem. If you think about it, we have to write a Jira Bamboo plugin, we have to write a Bamboo Jira plugin, and so on and so forth. So we decided to solve this problem once and for all in a way that we could use, and then you guys could use as well. And the solution to that problem you heard a little bit about at the keynote this morning, and it's application links. So this is the best, the easiest, the fastest way to connect an Atlassian application to any other application, be it some service online like Twitter or Zendesk, or a legacy app inside your organization. It handles identification, authentication, and configuration in a single place that will be the same for every app that uses it. So Jira administrators will know how to do it after they have had a little bit of experience with it. You can see an example here of the configuration where I'm linking a Jira to a random service, which I've just plugged in Twitter. Here's what it looks like when you do the same between Jira and Confluence. But you as a plugin developer, can take advantage of the same infrastructure and save yourself a lot of code that you would otherwise have to write. So if you want to learn more about Active Objects, there's a full-length talk tomorrow given by James Roper, who was one of the primary developers who originated Active Objects. So it's 4:15 tomorrow. Mark it on your calendar, and you'll find out everything you know to start using that inside your own plugins.
May I ask a question? Is that only a Atlassian-wide thing, or is it a standard, or do you want it to be a standard?
So it is an open source library, like most of the frameworks that we develop. Anybody else would be free to pick it up and use it, but we're not trying to make it a standard or anything like that. It's not really a protocol. It's built on open standard protocols like OAuth. Okay, so 4 major technologies that we've spent a lot of time on in the last year that we think will help your development lives. The Universal Plugin Manager, which is the best way to discover and install plugins, and the best way to distribute your plugins if you are a plugin author, open source or commercial. Active Objects solves the problem of large-scale plugin data storage. Speakeasy Extensions, which is a brand new framework for easy, quick, front-end plugins. And Application Links, which is the best way to connect an Atlassian app and your plugin running inside the Atlassian app to any other application. So those are the 4 major things that I wanted to tell you about, but that's not all we've done. There are a few small improvements that I want to make sure that I point you to, because they also are some pretty cool stuff. So we've continued to improve the plugin SDK, and in addition to just putting out new releases that up compatibility with the versions as they come out, we've also added 2 new features that I think are particularly useful. The first one is called Atlas Run Standalone. And this is the fastest way to get any Atlassian application, any version, up and running from a single command. So you can see it up there, Atlas Run Standalone, product equals something, version equals something else. And the SDK will go out to the internet, download the binary for that version, unpack it, configure it, put in some initial data, start it up for you, and then all you have to do is visit a URL and type in your login and password. So it's super easy for testing, for doing manual verification. I find myself using this at least once a week to verify some behavior in a particular version of the product. So that's just a handy trick to have in your bag. The second SDK feature I want to mention is what I'm calling portable home directories. So in the same way that the SDK can unpack, configure, and bring up one of our applications, you can pre-seed the data that lives in that application. So if you're doing plugin development and you want, for example, to create a bunch of projects and issues in Jira so that your tests don't have to do them to save time with sort of the preset data, you can make that configuration, you can save it off, make it part of your plugin source code, and then with a little bit of XML configuration, every time your plugin starts up, either manually or in test, that data will be loaded. So it's a super great time saver, both for manual testing and for automated testing. We've also added the Developer Email Center. So we are starting to do notifications that are relevant to plugin developers. So I really encourage you to visit my.atlassian.com to the email prefs, and you can tell us that you're interested in developer updates, and you can tell us exactly which products you do and don't care about. So this is the place where you can find out about EAP releases, betas, new technologies, things like Geist, SDK releases. If you're doing plugin development, I really encourage you to sign up and stay in touch this way, and we'll try to keep you up to date with the most important releases and information you need to know about. This year we also released the Atlassian User Interface Sandbox. So I want to take a minute to make sure that everybody knows what the Atlassian User Interface Library is. Inside we call this AUI, A-U-I. It is another framework that we provide both for ourselves and for plugin developers to bring a set of unified interface widgets to all of our applications. So you can see things like table styles, inline dialogues, messages, toolbars. We use AUI to make sure that all these elements look the same from Giro to Confluence to Bamboo and so on. But now the good news is that you as plugin developers can do exactly the same thing. You can use this library just like we do. And by doing so, you'll make sure that your plugins fit in visually with the applications that they're hosted in. And you'll also make sure that as upgrades happen, as we change the UI, you'll have less work to do to stay up to date with our visual styling. So if you go to that URL at the bottom, you can see a sandbox that we created where it will let you try out all these different components. It'll generate the code for you, the HTML and JavaScript and CSS. You can modify it, you can see what it looks like, and then when you're happy with it, you can cut it out and go start working with it in your own plugin. And then lastly, I want to mention answers.atlassian.com. So if you've been in the ecosystem community for any length of time, I'm sure you've seen this site. This is our forum site. This has been one of the primary places to get help with plugin development questions. Well, you also might have noticed that it has been relatively static for a fairly long amount of time, and we decided that this was the year that we were going to invest in a better, newer solution. And so in the keynote tomorrow, you're going to hear about answers.atlassian.com. It's a brand new site. It is based on an open source technology, and it follows the Stack Overflow model of questions and answers. And we've seen how successful that has been on sort of in broader topics with Stack Overflow, and we think it's going to be equally successful here in the Atlassian community. So this is now available. You can go log in right now with your my.atlassian.com credentials, check it out, start asking and answering questions, and you'll get a fuller demo tomorrow in the keynote. So that's 2011. A big year of technology investment, a lot of new capabilities for you guys to take advantage of. But I want to take a few minutes to talk about 2012. And if I could sort of sum up what we're thinking about 2012 so far is that we're listening to your feedback. We did a large plugin developer survey a few months ago, and we got a ton of great feedback from that. So if you participated, please thank you for doing that. And we have used that information to completely reprioritize our roadmap for the next several months, if not the next year. I want to tell you about a few things that we already have in progress that are in direct response to what we've heard from you guys. And the first you heard a little bit about in the keynote today, and it is full plugin reloadability in Jira 4.4. Woohoo! Yeah, so this has been a very long time coming. But we know that doing plugin development for Jira is slower and more painful than our other products because the plugins could not be reloaded on the fly. You have to restart Jira in many instances. So we bit the bullet in the 4.4 development cycle. We spent a fair amount of engineering effort on it. But with the release of 4.4 in just a few weeks, all plugins are fully reloadable. And we know this works because our guinea pig plugin was Greenhopper, which is certainly our most complicated plugin and is one of the most complicated plugins out there. And as of a few weeks ago, it is fully reloadable. That also means that if you're writing a Jira plugin that you are distributing to people, it means that thanks to the UPM, people can download and install that with a single click. No more restarts. It's going to make your development faster. It's going to make your deployment faster. And hopefully it will make Jira users more likely to try new plugins. We've also heard loud and clear from you guys that you are often frustrated by how often our API changes and how much work you have to do to keep up with it. So we're spending a lot of time in the Jira 5.0 cycle to try to mitigate that problem. We are going to commit to a public API, and we're going to make sure that that doesn't change between major versions of the product. And by major versions, I mean 5.0 to 6.0, not 5.0 to 5.1. So we're looking at a year or more time frames. And we're already starting to do some work on this. And I want to tell you a quick story about some of the tools that we're using. James Roper, who I mentioned earlier, he, in his 20% time, has built this amazing tool called the Plugin API Analyzer. And we're using this internally right now. And what it does is it downloads every plugin that is available in pack, and then runs that, or I guess checks that plugin rather, against the currently in development version of Jira. And so I can tell you that as of about 2 weeks ago, there were 14 plugins out of the 200 or so on pack that were incompatible because we had changed some API. So that's still 14 broken plugins, which is not great. But the important thing to note is that we know that now, weeks ahead of the launch, not a week after the launch. So we can take corrective action, we can fix the APIs on our end, or we can contact you guys and say, hey, look, you need to be ready for a change that's coming down the pipe. And we're going to be using that more extensively over the next product development cycles, and we intend to make that a publicly available service for everybody to use, even if you're dealing with private code rather than code that lives on pack. Now, by far, the most popular request from you guys in that survey was improved documentation. And so we are also going to spend a significant amount of time this year consolidating all of our developer docs, adding more tutorials, adding more examples, and hopefully making it much, much easier to both get up and running and also do the complicated stuff that you guys do in the plugins that you write. And I couldn't talk about next year without making sure to mention Atlas Camp. Atlas Camp is our premier developer-only event. It is the best place to get in touch with the plugin development community, to learn about new technologies, to work with Atlassians, to hear what we're working on. We hold it in Half Moon Bay every fall. It's about an hour south of here. And these dates are now official, so September 28th through 30th of this year. Mark it on your calendars. The tickets will be on sale a little bit later on this summer. It's a fantastic time. It's one of the highlights of my year every year. And if you've never been, well, actually, how many of you have been to Atlas Camp? Wow, okay, that's awesome, that's a lot. So those of you who have it, make sure you get in early so these guys don't steal all the tickets. And with that, I just want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you for every plugin that you have written. Thank you for every question that you've answered. Thank you for every issue that you have filed. Thank you for just the participation that you guys have shown in the Atlassian ecosystem. We think we have one of the smartest, best, most prolific ecosystems anywhere in the enterprise market. We think it's a huge strength, and we're really committed to making sure that you guys are successful. So thank you for all you do. And with that, I'm going to open up the floor to questions. But I do want to point out that this is a resources URL. Many of the technologies I talked about, you can go here, find links to the documentation, links to the binaries. This is the one thing that you should write down if you want to make sure you find all the stuff afterwards. But thank you very much.